Now within this, you have another category of people. And these are the people who really do have knowledge. And these people, for whatever reason, are shy to teach. And those people bear some of the responsibility of the condition of their communities. Because those people know that you can see the condition of the people. You have an obligation. You can't say, well, I've learned this, I've learned that, but now I will not disseminate it. Well, then what did you learn it for? You have an obligation. If, especially when people come to you and say, listen, especially if you see that there are deficiencies. If you see that there's a deficiency in tajweed to where there are things that are nullifiers, don't just be that person that, okay, well, I'm just going to repeat the salah by myself. And you just kind of grin and bear it, and you never teach people so that this doesn't repeat, because this can happen over generations. What are you going to do about this? How are you going to resolve the situation? Right? So those people as well, you can't be that person. Well, people won't listen to me, but we don't know whether or not they're going to listen because you haven't even tried yet. We don't know whether they're going to. The assumption is being made. They'll never listen. We don't know that though yet. You have to go out and try to see if you can disseminate and try to advise people. Okay, you try to advise them. Okay, they won't listen to me. Okay, are there individuals that will listen to you? Okay, the masjid won't listen to you. The committee won't listen to you. The charity commission won't listen. Okay, those three are there. Are there individuals within the congregation that attend that masjid? Will they listen? Well, yeah, some, but not many. You weren't told to look for many. You were told to disseminate the knowledge. That's not what you were told. You weren't told go find legions of people. You weren't told go find legions. You were told to teach people this religion, بَلَّغُوا عَنِّي وَلَوْ آيَةً, to convey the knowledge from me, even if it's an ayah.
SubhanAllah.
Hey, that statement in the Sahih Al-Jami' al-Suyuti, we see that that's what you were told. It didn't say anything about look for numbers.
Right.
So the people that are striving, maybe they have gone and gathered knowledge and come back. Those people then bleed into or melt into the background. And that's wrong for them to do as well. To just melt into the background. You see everything around you is on fire and in the shambles. And you just say, well, you know, Inna Allah ma'as sabirin. Yeah, but indeed Allah is with the patient ones, but you're not being patient. What you're doing is you're hiding. This is not that. It's one thing if you're negated or you're spoken against or you're, you know, whatever else people say, oh, don't learn from him or watch out. Okay, that's one thing. But even then, you still gather people that are going to listen. Okay, they won't let me do classes at the masjid. Oh, okay. Do they have access to your house? Well, no, they can't get, okay, so they can't break the door and get in your house and stop you. No, okay, do them at your house then. You know, if they say you can't do it at the masjid, they say, okay, listen, we don't want you in the masjid because the president of the committee does not want you to talk about that. Okay. President of the committee does not, because again, like I said, these aren't imams and masjids in the real sense. There are committees, there's people they're responsible to. The imam is paid from the funds that are taken from the collections. So he's not a freestanding person. He's responsible to the committee. So if the committee says, hey, we don't want you to talk about that, then he's not going to talk about that. And that's all there is to it.
Interestingly enough, there was not too long ago a point where there's a newly built local masjid nearby me, and I heard from a brother that they were looking for a teacher for youth to just teach them the Fard line. And I was called for an introduction, for an interview, and we talked an hour about, so, you know, what we could do and what I could teach them and so forth. But after explaining who I am, what I've studied and so forth, I made one remark, and I believe that one remark is what the board decided not to take me, which was I told them, yes, we'll teach the ihsan, the necessary fiqh and so forth, but I told them there are necessary chapters and certain subjects that they need to know living in Dar al-Kufr, like things related to talaq and nikah, certain dangers about the cults and certain issues. I made that clear that must be implemented as well. But even though they were in need of a teacher, they didn't accept me. And I presume for that, they were afraid, oh, this guy might brings you to trouble or something like that.
Yes. And that's the thoughts that they have. So knowing that, you can't then say, all right, well, that's it now. They won't let me do this, so I have no hope. It's like, well, no, you have a house, right? You're not homeless, are you?
Yes,
Okay, no, you're not homeless.
exactly.
Okay, so can you help and assist and teach
Yes.
or guide or other aspects of that in your home? Okay, then do it there.
No,
It's not finished. You still have obligations upon you. So
no.
the people that are students or the people that really do have advanced knowledge that went to Dar es Salaam and came back or sat with teachers and have advanced knowledge and have been given permission to teach it. It's not for them to melt away, shrink away and be shy and say,
Mm,
well, Allah knows best and everything else. Well, no, Allah knows best. That's true. But you also have knowledge. And it now becomes your business to resolve these affairs. You see, there are bodies of children that are playing on bikes outside the masjid or playing sports or whatever else and don't want to go in there or whatever else because they're waiting for their elder siblings to come out so they can go home. Okay, can you do some activities with those children? What can you do
right.
regarding those children?
Hmm.
Because they don't want to go in there, otherwise they would have. But they're playing sports outside of the masjid, doing other activities. Okay, is there another venue you can get them to? Is there another location where they'd feel comfortable to be there, where you can sit them down, maybe have some light refreshments, and then also give them some ilm? Say, okay,
Mm,
listen, we're going to have some apples with some juice. We're going to have some light refreshments, but I also want to do a little bit of Quran with you. Oh, okay, yeah, we'll do that. Because they don't feel like there's any pressure. But if they feel like there's pressure or they feel like they might get beaten or whatever, okay, they don't want to be there.
right.
So how do you deal with those kids and well, you have an obligation now because now it does involve you. You can't say, well, they've kicked me out of the masjid or they won't let me in the
Hmm.
masjid or I've been isolated or I've been exiled. Okay, so what do you do in your exile? You just cease living, you stop. No, you have an obligation. Now
Hmm.
you're responsible.
Hmm.
You're responsible. So you're still
Right.
responsible
And
for what you do. And this is part of the tatbiq, part of the
mm,
implementation of knowledge. You can't sit on the knowledge. You don't take your knowledge like how some people do when they pack their suitcase. They sit on it and they zip it shut. You can't do that with the ilm.
and
This is wrong to do.
this one of the things that I dislike about some of the imams and or teachers in the West, which is when they go to a Kafir school, if they were in a Kafir school, they would have to adhere to a system where they have to implement certain methods and pedagogical methods. But
Mm,
when it comes to masjid and ilm, like the ta'alim al-muta'allim, that's all thrown out suddenly. Like there's no methods used, like there's no psychology involved. It's just
mm.
like you listen and this is it. So
Yeah.
it's very dry when they
Yes.
deal with Islamic knowledge with the kids.
Yes. And the thing about it is when you're dealing with the people and they're going through the different issues that they're going through, you have to understand the condition of the people that you're dealing with. If you're coming to a people that, if they're all refugees from a war-torn country, okay, what do they need having come from that? What are they probably missing having come from a war-torn country? All right, well, let's see. They probably had their services destroyed. So they probably didn't have access to social services. There are probably lots of children that can't read in their native language
Hmm.
because they were deprived of being able to go to
Right.
school because it was a civil war. Okay. How do we get language classes started? Then you also have to be gentle as well because some of these children have never once gone to school because they just grew up in war. All right. So if children express certain behavioral issues, you can't crack down on them like children that have gone to school their whole lives. You have to have a balance. Okay, listen, he's never had to sit down for 50 minutes or 15 minutes or 20. He's never
Right.
had to because he's not been in that circumstance ever before.
Mm.
He's never had a situation. Some of the kids act out in class because they hear a loud noise and they jump or anything. You have to understand those conditions. If there are people that do come from a schooling environment, but the schooling environment is highly secular and it's
No.
communistic, you
Okay.
have to address that where normally you don't have to bring up communism if people have grown up in the Philippines. They're Muslims from Mindanao in the Philippines. You don't have to undermine communism and everything else
Hmm.
there, but you do if they came from northern Egypt. You do if they came
Hmm.
from Libya. You do have to undermine communism and attack it at times and have maybe a section on history where you discuss how the condition of your nation or the condition of your local area. You do have to sometimes, because the people are coming out of that condition. So at times you do have to discuss those things, whatever the disease may be. If you were invaded by America, you have to discuss the American disease.
Yes.
If you were invaded by the Soviet Union, you have to discuss Sovietism and the backgrounds and the leftovers of Stalinism and what that meant and everything else. And because it helps to explain why the people are the way they are today. And information that's missing, why it's missing today. Because eventually when you're teaching, someone will raise their hand and say, how come we were never taught this before? Or I went home, I spoke to my parents and my grandparents, and they said, we never heard of that. And we've been Muslims our whole life. Are you saying we don't know the deen? Well, I'm not saying they don't know the deen altogether. I'm saying there's aspects of it that by design weren't taught to them. And here's what I mean by that. So it's the ability to bridge those gaps, to have them understand so that when they implement the knowledge, they understand why there were these gaps. Because it can make you feel angry if you're an adult and there's information that you find out you were supposed to know since you were a child that you don't know. It can make you feel angry. It can make you very angry because you're thinking, well, whose fault is this? Is it my parents' fault? Is it my grandparents' fault? Why was this information kept from me? Why don't I know it? And so you have to have people that explain why that happened. And rather than becoming despondent or angry about it, that you focus their mind in the right direction, because you can become very angry about that and become bitter by it. But rather than be bitter or despondent, let's do something else instead.
It's similar to these imams here in the West who often, not all of them, but many do not address some of the outstanding issues, for example, like issues on abortion, issues on drug abuse, violent marriages, as if talking about these subjects is something like taboo, like they avoid these subjects.
Yeah. Well, some might say there are some people who, and it's not just the imams, the khatibs, you'll find there's some speakers as well.
Sure.
Who will say, let's not talk about that. And again, they'll use the same line. We don't want to air anyone's dirty laundry. Well, it's only dirty laundry if it's private. The statistics on suicide, drug abuse, rape among Muslims, there are statistics that are kept. The fact that there are statistics means it's in the public field. The fact that there are statistics means that there are studies that have been done on it by statisticians and people that have researched it. It's not private. So you can't say when we bring these issues up, you're airing dirty laundry. If it's in statistics held by the government that are released annually, it's not private. It's in the public space. So we're open to talk about it. So we have to have these conversations, whether we're discussing incest or porn or abortion or these other things. We have to discuss these issues, and we can't ignore it and just say, well, we don't want to expose anything that would be, shameful. Well, okay, listen, the idea of the whole shame culture, because people will sometimes blend between Haya and shame culture.
Interesting.
Haya, al-Haya, shu'batun min al-Iman. Haya is a branch of Iman. This is in Al-Bukhari. And people will use discussing abuses regarding abortion and other things like that. They'll say, oh, that's Haya. And don't you know, brother, Haya is a branch of Iman. That's not Haya. What's happening? We're discussing Ulum. You, by bringing in shame culture and saying we can't talk about these things, that's nonsense. That's utter and complete nonsense. Because every book of fiqh, from the most basic all the way up to advanced, has a section on the monthly cycle. It has a section on that.
Right.
It has a section on the nullifiers of wudu, or what necessitates ghusl. And all scholars discuss when men have wet dreams. The rough hair that forms on the underarms, the genital areas that signals puberty and adulthood. These are things that are in all the fiqh books. That means little kids are studying these things. All these things are being discussed. We can't ignore this stuff. It's real. So this idea that discussing these matters is somehow shameful and where's your shame? Listen, let the people in Korea, Japan, Let them have the shame culture. That's for them. In
Subhanallah.
Islam, we don't have that.
Naam.
That type of shame is madhmoom, it's blameworthy,
Allahu Akbar.
because it prevents you from getting ilm.
Yes.
This is incorrect, this type of shame culture, and it has to be opposed. You have Ahmed Ali, who was the head of the Wonderland Club, which was one of the world's largest child pedophilic rings. The guy was from a Muslim Turkish background.
Wow.
Well, we're going to pretend that's not there. That's in the public sphere.
Right.
That's in the public record. Almost 1 million indecent images. That was in 1999 of the Kafir count. We don't know how more advanced it is now. He was arrested, but he fled the country. The fact that the biggest runner of heroin in the UK is a Kurdish man who was referred to as King Solomon, because he had so much power and he was controlling the heroin industry in West London. That's a fact. That's not private information. That's public. So what? We can't talk about that. We can't talk about a guy named Suleiman is the biggest heroin dealer in the UK. We can't talk about that. No, we need to talk about it. What would make someone think that that's okay to do, or that's the right way to go? And then you have to know that if he's the biggest heroin dealer, that means he has assistants, runners. That means his family have to be ignoring it. That means this guy, he doesn't not have kids. He has children, which means he's married, which means his wife has to know about it. Okay, what makes Muslims think this is okay, or that we have to, you have to go through all that stuff and talk about it.
And currently, when we talk about this subject of the rights, I also don't fully blame the unbelievers, because, like I've said, if we look at the public statistics, the Muslims are in some of the worst heinous crimes here in the West.
Yes, and we have to acknowledge this and not pretend like this isn't what it is. They say, well, when you look at the kuffar, the stats on the kuffar, it's because they're the majority of the population.
No.
But you should not be disproportional.
Yes.
You should not disproportionately have these numbers. If you're 2 to 3 million of the population, but you're committing 50% of the crime, or you're disproportionate to the crime, that's why it's a big deal.
Wow.
We would expect in a majority country like the UK, if 65 million or 70 million is the population, let's say 50 million of them are English people, we would expect that most of the crime will be accounted for by the majority population. But if there's a section within the population that's not originally from that population that has come in, and they're overrepresented in certain crime statistics, then yes, that has people that are the dominant society have a right to say there's a problem with this.
Yeah, that's it.
Because you're overrepresented.
Somehow.
You're not overrepresented in science. You're not overrepresented. You're not overrepresented in writing scientific papers.
Indeed.
You're not. We know that the most successful school in the UK of the non-English schools, it's called the Gateshead Jewish Yeshiva.
Oh.
They're listed as outstanding.
Wow.
That's their listing. These are non-Jews that came in that investigated the school. I almost went down there with another Muslim brother just to understand, okay, what policies did they implement to have the success that they had?
Interesting.
Because we were thinking about, all right, what if we wanted to open a school? Like what policies could we implement? So we almost went down there, but the 22-month lockdown happened.
Right.
And even during the lockdown, they were still getting outstanding scores.
Oh.
But it's because they were self-contained. They were self-contained. Now, they disproportionately outshine the majority schools in the country. Now, that's a good stat.
MashaAllah.
That's a good stat. And not only that, they're not just any Jews, but they're Haridim. Haridi Jews are the most stringent of all the Jewish groups.
Wow.
So the fact that they were still able to do that, they created their own school district where they have their own buses, their own transportation to and from. That's overrepresentation. But if you're overrepresented, and this goes back to something we discussed on more than one occasion. When you look at conspiracy theories about Jews, Conspiracy theories about Jews are always they got too much money and they're running everything.
Right.
It's the conspiracy theories are about them being too successful.
Yes.
To the degree that hey, they got too much, they got all the gold,
Yeah.
they have all the money, they have all the movies, they have everything.
They're
Those are
behind
conspiracy
everything.
theories.
Yeah.
The conspiracy theories about Muslims are criminality. They're coming to molest all the kids. They're coming to rape your boys. They're coming to those are situations where our criminality is being
Right.
amplified.
Look at
The
that.
stereotypes about Jews are not amplifying their criminality.
Right.
It's amplifying their business acumen.
Indeed.
They're so successful, they're just going to take everything.
Yeah.
That's what they're amplifying.
Subhanallah.
And these are the things we have
Wow.
to think about because people tend to amplify us. People tend to take small nuggets of truth
Wow.
and they'll amplify things that are perceived as negative.
Wow, that is interesting. Subhanallah.
And these are things that as Muslims we have to think about. When you're staying in Western Europe, you have to think about these types of things that's what they've chosen to amplify.
Wow, subhanallah. Yeah, it means something. There's something going on then.
Talking about being wealthy. We're not talking about having money. We're talking about people that stand out in the fields of electron microscopy, people that stand out in the fields of literature.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about just being in the field. You're just participating then. I'm talking about you're someone that you're not only in the field, but you change the field. You change the way that the field is perceived, or you write a paper, a peer-reviewed research or paper that changes the way that research is done in that field. That is disproportionate successful representation. That is what, as Muslims, we should be striving to do, to not just participate. We're not looking just to have a participation trophy, but to really do something. What field in electron microscopy, what field in hematology, what fields in the studies of robotics, like what field are we currently in Western Europe doing that's outshining or has disproportionately represented us in a way that's not been done before? Right? We can't say anything off the top of our head right now, but I can mention to you that a Jew came up with the polio vaccine.
Wow.
I can mention to you that a Jew came up, like I can mention that Elisha Gray was the one that invented the phone first and not Alexander Graham Bell. I can mention these things. Right? I can mention all of these things because of the disproportionate representation in these fields. So we have to think when we implement knowledge now, if we implement the knowledge properly, it will lead to those overrepresentation in those fields if we implement this ilm. But if we don't, and we try to make shortcuts, we try to cut corners, we try to do things like that, then you won't get those rewards. You won't get those blessings. You won't get that goodness because you're instead trying to compete with these people in their corruption. And you're not going to out-corrupt a corrupter. It's just not going to happen. So our situation with the implementation of knowledge, if you're looking for success in the akhirah and this life, it's in implementing that knowledge.
Right.
It really is. And every time you neglect it, it shows through. It's like there's no reason why a Muslim school shouldn't be on the outstanding level as the Gateshead yeshiva. Shouldn't be. There's no excuse for it. We weren't kicked out of England for 500 years. We didn't go through a Holocaust where 2/3 of all Jews in Europe were killed. We weren't kicked out of England for 500 years. That didn't happen. We didn't have to rebuild from scratch. We were never told you can only work these jobs. That never happened to us Muslims that live in this country. So then what's the impediment stopping us from performing at that level or higher? None. There's no impediments. There's no impediments. So the Muslims, it's like we can't have this dual idea where the Jews are kuffar, but then we say on another is, well, how come the Jews are able to get, and then we sign up to conspiracy theories regarding the Jews. You can't have it both ways.
Right.
You can't have it both ways. Their success is not because of shape-shifting reptilian lizards It's not because of extraterrestrials. It's not because of the Illuminati. There are no 50 families. That it's all fake.
No.
It's pretty much that stuff as elbow grease and building for the past 500 years. Now, we'll be able to do the same thing in a shorter period of time if we implement this knowledge. Because as Muslims in our Shar, we don't have as many restrictions as the children of Israel do in their Shar and what's left of it that they're following. We don't have as many restrictions. We don't have 200 dietary laws. So we're able to expand and do way more in business. We have way fewer laws regarding stringency in business than they do.
So what is basically their support for this? Because are you saying because of the 500 years they had more time to develop, or because
they had more time to develop? Because the children of Israel, when they were forbidden by the Catholic Church from holding any jobs except for banking and lawyering, because those were seen as the lowest jobs.
Right.
When the rise of mercantilism came in and the Industrial Revolution, those happened to be the jobs that were best for mercantilism as well as the Industrial Revolution. You needed those jobs. So they were already in those fields. So when they excelled in those fields, well, they were the only fields they were allowed to. If I'd come to you and said, if someone had come to the Ingushettian people and said, Ingushettians, we're only going to allow you to be accountants. You can't be anything else. We don't trust you to be anything else. So if the Russian Empire, you'd be the best accountants there were. If we had Ingushettians doing it for 500 years, it doesn't matter what we had you do. 500 years is 500 years.
Interesting.
And so this is part of the background of what happened with the children of Israel. Now, we don't have to do it for 500 years.
No.
If we obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and follow his guidelines and strive, we can have that same success in a shorter period of time. But we can't take shortcuts. We can't try to cut corners. And we can't try to say, well, we'll just do it the way that they did it. Well, you can't do it the way that they did it because you don't have the background they had. You didn't go through what they had to reach where they had, to get to the point where they had.
And do you think all of this mainly comes down to not having enough understanding of fiqh, the real law itself in general?
I would say that a lot of this does come down to that. The Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said in the hadith that's in Imam Ahmad's Musnad, he said, I don't fear for you worshiping the sun, the moon, an idol, a star, or an idolatrous image after. I fear for you that you will be given of the things of the dunya and that you'll compete with one another and fight one another for them. And that's what you find. When you'll find Muslims that engage in certain things, it will come down to the earthly life. Wait a minute, hold on. Why are you selling drugs? Well, I need to get money to support my family. Wait a minute, hold on. Why don't you do it legitimate? Because this is quick and everything else. Okay, that's the earthly life. Why are you doing the OnlyFans or the Instagram stuff or anything else? Looking for the earthly life. Like everything else is going to come down to those things. It's not coming down to because I want to worship besides Allah, because I really want to. Even when you hear about Muslims apostating, 9 times out of 10, it's behind some fleshly, earthly reason. Well, my grandmother died, or when I moved to the West, I couldn't do this. I didn't have my freedom. I didn't have this. I didn't have that. And so, it just makes sense that now I'm this. Listen to some of these apostates. When you listen to a lot of these apostates speak, usually it's some fleshly, earthly reason why they left the deen. Because I can't reconcile this with the life that I lead. I can't reconcile this. Okay, well, those are all flesh. Like there's nothing theological behind. There's no conviction there on why you're an atheist now, or you're a Christian now, or you're a Sikh now, or anything. There's not any flesh behind that theologically. It's just, I left because I want to be able to do this. And then what they want to do is something fleshly, something carnal, something earthly. It's like, okay. Whether it's Ayan Hirsi Ali, Noni Darwish, all these people, when they talk about whether they're atheists or whether they recently, Ayan Hirsi Ali now says she's Christian, right? All these things, they always come down to, in most instances, some fleshly, earthly reason. Oh, I don't feel this is right. My brother was gay and I found out what Islam said about homosexuality. I just couldn't follow a religion that was like that. Or I found out the laws on inheritance and I just felt that wasn't right. Or I read the ayat on jihad and the ahadith, and I felt that was okay. Those are fleshly. There's nothing theological behind that. It's just fleshly, earthly reasons of what they feel. And most of the feelings that they talk about are driven by earthly pursuits. I don't feel that's right because my brother's gay, or I don't feel that's right because so-and-so is a good person, or these people are good, whatever the case may be.
Right.
It's fleshly, earthly things.
And this narrative that you just quoted, is that a general throughout the time of the Ummah, or is it specific to the latter part of the Ummah?
It's what's referenced to in general. It's a general statement. Because even if you look at the Abbasids, what were the Abbasids poisoning Imam Abu Hanifa and going after Imam Ahmed, everything else? Fleshly reasons.
Right.
Fleshly reasons. There was a theological element that was there, but why were they wearing purple robes and rolling Seljuks? Same thing with the later Ayyubids, same thing with the later Mamluks. Like, they were all chasing something.
SubhanAllah.
And they were chasing something that it just slips through your hands. Because dunya, it's like a lot of the scholars of commentary on the word dunya, when you look at the root of it, it's something that you reach out to it, but it's just out of reach. It's like if you're reaching out to the branch of a tree to grab it, but it's just that little bit out of reach. Like, that's the dunya. You think you've got a hold of something, and you never have it. You never have a hold of it. You have all this money, but then there's other stuff that you want that you don't have. You have a whole bunch of women, but then there's other women that you can't get. Or you have all the men, but then there's other men that you can't get. You have all the respect, but then there's that one guy that doesn't respect you. You don't know why. You want to make him respect. It's like you have the rank and status, but then someone's got more rank and status than you. But so you try to take that person down. This is always these worldly things that affect people. And that's part of the deception of the earthly life, is how you can get pulled into something where you don't want to get pulled into it. You can get led astray by something and you don't want to get led astray, but you have to pay attention, because these are all the areas that Muslims, where they're fighting for the dunyawi things, that's the distinction between fighting for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and fighting for dunyawi things. Nationalistic fights. Well, we're going independent. So you had the Sudan-Egypt thing. And then you had the South Sudan, Northern Sudan thing. We don't want to be associated with Arabs. Well, why? Because we want our own independence. Why? To be who we want to be. Why? Because it will give us greater idea, because we'll be a charter member in the UN. Why? Because then we can use our natural resources. Okay, there's the earthly lie. There's the earthly lie.
Wow.
But the South Sudanese are no better off, because now that they have this anti-Arab sentiment, well, their language was written down using the Arabic alphabet. So now what are you going to use? So the Americans have slipped in and said, hey, for a little bit of oil, we'll let you use our alphabet.
SubhanAllah.
So now they're their slaves. So they've not really gotten out of the situation, because they're still slaves. Rather than being slaves of Allah, they're slaves to the slaves of Allah. So you've not broken free at all.
No.
And this is the real danger in lacking implementation of this knowledge. In the lack of implementation of this knowledge in the fiqh, what happens is people will go in the direction of the fleshly life. Because people will say, well, I do my prayers when I can. And they think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is confined to wudu, ghusl, istinja, and salah.
Yes.
But when it comes to like what I buy, what I want to buy in a store, when I want to buy a house, when I want to get with a woman, how I conduct my business, that's none of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's business. That's my business.
SubhanAllah. Yes. That's the attitude here.
That's the thinking. That's not his business. That's my business. Even though there are big, thick books, the biggest book after the book of Salah in fiqh is the book of transactions.
Allah.
The biggest book after the book of Salah. It's like Salah and transactions. And it makes sense, because that's a lot of what we're doing outside of the moment we finish from Salah. We get up and we do what? We interact with our families.
Indeed.
I have to go buy bread. We interact with the local merchant. I need to buy milk. We interact with the local farmer. I need to go do that. We interact with, we need to interact with people. Well, by interacting with people, you transact. So how do you transact? Well, there's laws around transaction. How do you keep from being cheated or cheating people? There are laws around the book of transactions.
No.
I want to get married. Okay, well, are you talking about just marrying one woman or yeah, just one woman? Okay, want to get married and have a family. Okay, there's rulings on how that's to be done. Well, I'm just going to get married. I'll just do it my way. It's like, well, no, you're not in control to decide because there's no way to be pleasing to Allah and to be engaged in sexual intercourse and have children without the institution of marriage. But the institution of marriage has been set down by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what it needs to look like.
No.
This is how it's got to be. Now, outside of those general guidelines, you move within. That's why there are different cultures, everything else. Same thing with halal food. Here are the things that are haram. Here are the things that are halal. There's slight difference of opinion, but these are the general things. Outside of that, how we season the food, whether you add extra paprika or I only add a few pinches, alhamdulillah, that's where all the different cultures come in. But you still have guidelines.
No.
But there are a body of some Muslims in these Western European countries that say, well, no, man, when I make my salah, everything else, that's for Allah.
No.
When it comes to, I own a shop and I sell jackets or I sell clothes, that's not Islam's business. That's my business. Whether I sell 20 in a day and I lied about the jacket, I told someone, hey, that jacket looks amazing on you, and I'm lying, that's my business. I got to put food on the table. Or where my children go, how they're educated, that's my business. How I get the money to buy my house, how I treat my wife, how I treat my kids, how I got the money to buy the cars that I have. Hey, man, that's all my business. That's not your business. Stay out of my business. But it is our business, though.
Interesting. So these people are actually failing the very first step of ta'lim. And this is where, and I mean hereby the step by this principle of 3 steps that was laid down by Shaykh Abdullah Sufyan al-Qaddumi of Ta'lim, Tahkim and Tatbiq. Could you tell us a little about that, how we implement this principle?
Hey, for this, for Ta'lim, you have to learn the knowledge and you have to be able to sit and gather the data with someone who is trustworthy that teaches you. For the tahkim, you have to implement that knowledge that's relevant to you to the degree that's necessary. You have to know what applies to it and what doesn't apply, how it applies. And then the third is the implementation to the highest degree possible. If we take, for example, the salah, someone would learn the salah and the wudu and the other rulings from someone reliable. Then after he's learned that, he learns what are the pillars of salah, what are the wajibs of salah. After he learns that, then he finds out who's obligated for the salah. Well, I am. Okay. How many people live in my household? There's 5 people. All right. 5 men? Yeah, just 5 adult men. Okay. So then they've got to carry out the salah. I've got to teach them. I've got to discharge the salah, and so do they. So he's responsible for making sure that those things happen in that 3-step pattern whenever you have knowledge. This is one of the things that's missing for some Muslims in Western Europe, the ability to do these things. Some of it's self-imposed. Some of it's not. Some of you say, well, okay, it's not his fault that they never have access to it. Okay, but now that you do have access to it, what do you do about it now?
Right.
When you do have access to it, when you can access it, do you just say, well, I never had access to it before? But you do now, though. So what do you do now that you have access? Do you carry on? Do you do what you're supposed to do?
And it's interesting because you once mentioned to me that here in the West, in general, there's no ta'aleem, but there's mutala'ah, like debating certain points of the religion.
Yes, things will come up over and over again. So I don't know how many times people are going to argue about Mawlid. I don't know how many times people are going to argue about, is this group kafir, that group is Muslim? No, they're not. They're this, they're that. Did the Rasul, did he have a shadow or didn't he? Did the Sahaba do that? Like certain things,
right?
Mawlid, shadows. Did he have a shadow or didn't he? Did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his parents? What do we say about his parents? What about Abdul Muttalib and Abu Talib? Like I don't know how many more times.
Yes, it continues.
You can go over these things because The proofs are the same. They've not gone anywhere. There's no extra proof you're going to find. They're just what they are. Because had there been some other argument or some other, it would have been found by now, but there isn't.
No.
But these things, someone could mistakenly think that someone, wow, that person's really knowledgeable. It's like, no, they know those argument topics. And so it gives what I call a spiky profile. So, and spiky profile happens in the ESL world where certain people seem like they know more English than you think. Like, for example, Japanese and Chinese people will have a spiky profile. If you speak to them online, you think it's subhanallah. This is really, I can't wait to meet Yoshiro Nakagawa. He seems like a great guy. You can't wait to meet him in public to speak with him. We have so many things in common. Then you meet him in public and he really struggles to speak English.
SubhanAllah.
And you're thinking, how did that happen? So it's a spiky profile. Because when it comes to reading and writing, his grammar is really amazing. Like if you ask him what's the past continuous, what's the past perfect, he can tell you all those things. But in terms of actually producing the sounds and speaking English, well, where would Yoshiro Nakagawa, where would he find the time to practice speaking English in metropolitan Tokyo? He wouldn't. Where would your Chinese student who lives in Beijing, where would he find time to practice English on a regular basis? He wouldn't find time to practice it, but he understands it and he can read and write it. It's just a spiky profile. Well, in the deen, you have some people have spiky profiles. If you ask him about the Mawlid or the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, incredibly spiky profile. You think, subhanAllah, does his brother memorize the Quran? He's quoting all the iyyah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said in Surah Al-Ma'idah 5th Surah 15, there's come to you a light from Allah in a clear book. That light, Ibn Kathir, others say, Yani Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the whole room, Allahu Akbar. SubhanAllah, this guy was memorized the Quran. But if you ask him about any of the practicalities of knowledge, he's, that brother, I'd have to, hold on. Right, he's stuttering and everything. Why? Because he has a spiky profile.
Right. Somehow
he knows about just those debating topics, but he doesn't know, say, the topics that you can't debate on, like inheritance. Like who debates an inheritance?
I've never heard anyone debate about it.
Who in Western Europe is going to say, I don't think that the illegitimate child inherit. I don't think so.
They don't know it.
They don't know these types, and they avoid them because once they start seeing the stats, this one gets a full sudus. It's like, akhi, I need to go home now.
Right.
What are the three things that cause one to inherit? Excuse me, I need to go now.
And then it's like, akhi, we shouldn't argue about the religion. SubhanAllah.
But these are the issues that happen to people over and over again, because those really fundamental issues, when that's the first ilm that will be lifted. That's the first ilm. Is the fara'id.
Allahu Akbar.
Out of all the different ulum, that's the first one.
And Shaykh, also, for the Muslim, just to consider the akhirah on Yawm al-Qiyamah, the questions to you put will not be about theology. It will be your practical application of the religion, right?
Yes, because if your theology is wrong, don't worry about anything. Because there's a hadith in Tirmidhi and other collections that says the 72 sects are all in the fire. So you're not going to be asked. If you rejected Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sifat al-khabariyah, don't worry. You'll just go straight in the fire. You won't be asked about them. You won't be asked about them. If you denied the sifat al-af'al, don't worry.
No.
You'll get burned up because you denied them. But in terms of your practical application regarding your fellow man, or what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you to do, get these things done, that you will be asked about. Salah, bloodshed, how you treated people in transactions. Those things you will be reckoned of.
Right.
But with regards to the foundational detailed theology, you either have it or you don't.
That's it, right?
You're either saved or you're not. If you're not, you go to where the wrath of Allah will abide, where his rahmah is not. If you have it, then you'll be saved. if you were ignorant and had things that were wrong or whatever else, you will be punished to the degree necessary and extracted.
Mm.
But
Oh,
who wants to take that risk? Nobody.
right.
Nobody.
Mhm.
So these are the issues where it's necessary for people to understand about what we're obligated,
Mm.
because we're all obligated to a certain level of ilm. Like, okay, who's responsible for this?
Mhm.
Who's responsible for that? You. Are you responsible? Yeah, I'm responsible. Right. But when it comes to certain things where people say, okay, well, we won't talk about that. We won't get into that. When it's the detailed matters of the religion that we
Mm.
all bear a certain
Right.
responsibility for, all of a sudden people say, Akhi, let's not get into these things.
No.
It's dividing the
Yeah, yeah,
ummah.
yeah.
It's like,
No unity.
hold on.
Yes.
We need to focus on other things. What? Like the shadow of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whether he had
Always.
one or not.
Yeah.
The fate of his parents, the fate of his grandfather and his uncles. Like, what does that got to do with anything?
Right.
What's that got to do with anything?
Mm.
But those are the things that people will argue about, and some of them, some of the things they're arguing about are things that they don't even see. Akhi, we have people making tawaf around the graves. Okay, how often do you see somebody making tawaf around? Well, I don't. Okay, so what are you worried about? Is there someone in Western Europe that's making tawaf around a grave? No. Okay, so subhanallah. Why is that your affair to be concerned about? It's not happening in your locale. What do you care for? Are there people that are putting on ihram and visiting a grave in your local area? No. Okay, so why are you bringing this stuff up?
No.
It's not going to help you.